Elara had vanished on a cold, unforgiving February night in the year 2000. The quiet house was a canvas of shadow and moonlight, a scene of perfect peace, until it wasn't. Sarah, Elara's mother, had tucked her in just an hour earlier, her little girl a warm, sleepy weight in her arms. But now, in the pre-dawn stillness, a sound broke through the muffled quiet, a sharp, unsettling gust of wind. It was the whisper of a door that wasn't closed, a window that wasn't latched. A cold dread, sharp and sudden as a shard of ice, pierced Sarah's heart. She rushed to Elara's room, her bare feet silent on the cold hardwood floor. The bed, with its canopy of pink stars, was empty. The window, a narrow slit in the wall, was open just enough to let in a frantic dance of lace curtains. The world outside, veiled in a thick, wet fog, seemed to hold its breath. The authorities arrived with grim, professional faces, their flashlights cutting through the mist like desperate swords. The community organized search parties, their voices echoing through the dense woods and quiet streets. But the trail went cold almost as quickly as it had appeared. The years bled into one another, each one a stark, empty page in a book that should have been filled with a child's life. Elara's disappearance became a ghost that haunted the small town of Everwood, a name whispered in hushed tones, a tragic memory that refused to fade. For Sarah, the pain never dulled. It simply became a part of her, a heavy coat she wore every day, its threads woven from grief and a relentless, aching hope. The memory of Elara was everywhere, a constant, vivid presence in their now silent home. It was in the faded chalk drawings on the driveway, the outlines of a stick-figure family slowly being erased by time and weather. It was in the mismatched ribbons she kept in a small velvet box, each one a different shade of Elara's favorite color. But most of all, it lived in the box of toys in the attic. Sarah couldn't bring herself to get rid of them. The attic became her sanctuary and her torment, a place where she could sit among the relics of a life cut tragically short, just breathing in the dust and the memory, trying to conjure the feeling of Elara's small hand in hers. Her husband, Daniel, a kind and steady man who had once been filled with a boundless, childlike joy, retreated into himself. He had been a train enthusiast since he was a boy, and he had poured his passion into his daughter. He had taught her the names of the different rail cars, the sound of the whistle, and the rhythm of the wheels on the tracks. He would take her to the retired railway line that ran just a few miles from their home, pointing out the rusted, magnificent hulks of the old locomotives and cabooses. After Elara vanished, the trains became a symbol of his failure. They were the very thing he had loved that had perhaps led to her disappearance. The sound of a train whistle in the distance would make him flinch, and he would often leave the house to walk for hours, returning with the same haunted look in his eyes. He had lost his daughter, but in many ways Sarah felt she had lost her husband, too. 9 years had passed. The calendar now read 2009. The anniversary of Elara's disappearance had come and gone. A quiet, somber day marked by a single candle in the window. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, with the sky the color of a bruised plum, Sarah found herself in the attic again. She was looking for a box of old tax records, a mundane task meant to distract her from the crushing emptiness of the day. But her hand, as if guided by an invisible force, didn't find the records. Instead, it brushed against a forgotten treasure, Elara's favorite toy, a worn stuffed elephant with a red ribbon tied crookedly around its neck. It was a simple toy with a small circular button on its foot that could record a message. Elara had loved to record her voice on it, singing nonsensical nursery rhymes in her sweet, off-key voice or just babbling with the pure, uninhibited joy of a child. Sarah's fingers, trembling with a mixture of fear and a desperate, fragile hope, pressed the button. She expected to hear the familiar, high-pitched, "I love you, Mommy." Instead, she heard a sound she had never, ever heard before. It was Elara's voice, yes, but underneath it, barely audible and distorted by the passage of time, was a faint metallic clang, followed by a man's low voice, muffled and indistinct, but undeniably there. "Shut the door." It was a fragment, a whisper from the past, a ghost of a conversation. But it was new. It was a new piece of the puzzle, a single shard of glass in a world of dust and memories. It sent a shiver down Sarah's spine, a cold premonition mixed with a blazing spark of something she hadn't felt in years. Purpose. She played it again and again, holding the toy close to her ear, isolating the sound. The metallic clang. It wasn't a bell, it wasn't a gate. It was the heavy sound of a train door closing. She knew it. Her husband's obsession had become her own in that moment. A language she understood instinctively. The train. The retired railway line. He had taken Elara there. She knew it. With a surge of renewed purpose that made her feel dizzy, Sarah brought the recording to the police station. She sat in a small, windowless office, the worn elephant clutched in her hands, as the detective, a kind but world-weary man who had been on the original case, listened with a skeptical expression. After 9 years, he asked gently, what could a tiny sound mean? How could a fragment of a noise lead them anywhere? But Sarah's certainty was infectious. It wasn't the manic despair of a grieving mother. It was the quiet conviction of a woman who had just been given a lifeline. She insisted he listen to the sound, to the metallic clang, to the man's muffled voice. She told him about Daniel's love for trains, about their trips to the abandoned railway. She pointed to a faded map of the county on the wall, her finger tracing the forgotten route of the old tracks. The detective, seeing the fire in her eyes, agreed to re-examine the case file, focusing on the old railway station and the miles of overgrown tracks. The search, this time, was different. It was smaller, more focused, a quiet team of investigators combing through the dense thicket that had long ago swallowed the railway line. The search dogs, their paws silent on the wet earth, were not looking for a lost child. They were looking for a sign of life or a sign of a place where life had been. A few weeks later, following a new tip from a local man who remembered a recluse living near the tracks, they discovered an abandoned caboose tucked away in a dense thicket, its door sealed shut with a heavy padlock and a chain, long since rusted and forgotten. The moment the lock was broken was a blur of sound and emotion. The squeal of the hinges, the gasp of a police officer, the sudden, terrible scent of dust and stagnation and something else, something human. Inside, in the cavernous, dark space, they found a young woman, frail and gaunt but alive. She was huddled in the corner, eyes wide and unblinking, like a fawn caught in a car's headlights. Her hair was long, matted, and dark. Her clothes were rags. But on her lap, clutched in her hands, was the elephant toy. Her name was Elara. The man who had abducted her was a reclusive railway worker who had been living in a small shack near the tracks. He had seen Elara playing near the station with her father. He was a man consumed by loneliness and a disturbed obsession with preserving a past that had never been. He had found a hidden life for himself in the abandoned rail yard, and in Elara, he saw a living doll, a child he could keep and protect from the world that had cast him aside. He had held her in the caboose, a prisoner of his own disturbed mind. He would bring her food and water, but he never spoke to her much, and he rarely let her leave. Over the years, Elara had been too terrified to speak, to scream, to cry. The fear had consumed her voice. But the toy had been a small comfort, a silent friend in her isolation. She would hold it and press the button, listening to the echoes of her own past, a voice from a time before the darkness. The fateful moment when her mother had played the toy was a lucky accident, a moment when the abductor's own impatience had sealed his fate. He had tried to get the toy from her, but she had held on to it, and in his whispered command to shut the door, he had provided the one clue that would lead to his capture and her rescue. The reunion was not a moment of pure joy, a Hollywood ending of tears and relief. It was a fragile, hesitant step toward healing. Elara was not the bright-eyed little girl who had vanished. She was a young woman now, a survivor, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. She was silent. She couldn't speak, couldn't form the words to describe the years she had lost. But her mother, Sarah, understood. She didn't need words. She simply held her, her own tears finally flowing freely after 9 years of being locked away. The road to recovery was long and arduous. Elara's silence was the first hurdle. She communicated through gestures, through the sad, knowing look in her eyes. Sarah and Daniel found themselves becoming students of their own daughter, learning her new language of quiet needs and fears. They brought her to therapy, to specialists who understood the deep trauma of long-term captivity. They had to learn how to be a family again, not a family of 3, but a family of 2 parents and a young woman who had been through a private war. Daniel, in a strange act of catharsis, began working on the old railway line again, not to indulge his old passion, but to dismantle the very place that had held his daughter captive. He took apart the old caboose, piece by piece, as if erasing the memory with his own hands. The act was a symbol of their family's new journey, of rebuilding their lives from the wreckage. Elara would sometimes watch him, a silent, watchful shadow, and her father would look at her, his heart breaking and mending all at once. One day, almost a year after her rescue, Elara found the elephant toy again. It was in a box in her room, a relic of her captivity. Sarah watched from the doorway, her heart in her throat, as Elara pressed the button. This time, there was only one voice on the recording. The metallic clang, the man's whispered voice. They were gone, replaced by a simple, clear message. "I love you, Mommy." It wasn't an old recording. It was a new one, a voice Elara had recorded herself, her first words after years of silence. Sarah rushed to her, tears streaming down her face, and pulled her into a tight, fierce embrace. In that moment, holding her daughter for the first time in 9 years, Sarah knew that hope, no matter how faint, had always been there. It had been waiting in the dark, in the silence, on a forgotten toy, just waiting to be heard. Their story was not over. It was just beginning, a testament to a mother's unwavering love, a family's resilience, and the slow, beautiful process of finding home again.